To update you on the ways that NFRN has worked with the various governments, please welcome Chairman of the Political Engagement Committee, Stuart Reddish, and Head of Political Engagement, Adrian Roper.
Is it still morning? Oh yeah, still morning. Tea break soon, soon. So, political engagement, like I said in my opening remarks, we've had some real good successes. You know, the carry bag levy in particular was one that was not level playing field, and we've managed to get that through. And the Scottish Government recognising crime against retailers in terms of when we get assaulted, that's, you know, it's fantastic news. But we need England to do the same. There's still things to do. But the committee itself met 10 times, as it says. We're continuing to push our agenda through those corridors of Westminster. And in particular where the PCCs are, as you know, we wrote to every single PCC in this country, and we made sure that everybody in this room had an opportunity in their areas to meet with them, but we do need more people. And what I really think it's really important that we do is that if you're able, willing, and you can speak to the media, and again needs a list of people that is willing to do it, able to do it in the different areas, because throughout this 2.5 years I've done many radio programmes, many TV programmes, and sometimes we've missed out because they don't want to speak to me because of my accent. They want to speak to somebody in Scotland with a Scottish accent, Ireland with an Irish accent, and London with a London accent. So can I ask and appeal to you guys, if there is really anybody that's comfortable doing that sort of work, and I understand it's not for everybody, but if you can please give your name and your phone number, your mobile phone number, your email address to Anne, so she has a pool of people, because she puts it out on National Council. She asks for the National Council. I occasionally ring some National Council up to certain areas and say, will you do it? And quite frankly, most of them say no to me because they don't want to put themselves in that situation because they're not used to standing up and doing that type of activity. So that's a real plea from me for this department before I'm going to hand over to Adrian Roper, who'll give you a full update on what we've been doing. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Good morning, Conference. On the screen you can see the members of the committee chaired by the National President. The committee is supported by a small team of staff members. Both Shona and Sophie joined us this year. Shona is a consultant who focuses on Scotland and the island of Ireland, and Sophie, who's based at head office, assists me with work across the rest of our political agenda. The addition of these two members of staff to our team has already helped us to do more to help represent you, our members. Despite the demands put on us by the COVID pandemic, we have been able to focus, which has been the focus of much of our attention for the last 18 months. The team has continued to move forward across the range of issues and support our members as we strive to be the go-to trade association. For example, as the National President mentioned, we've contacted all 42 police and crime commissioners in England and Wales following their elections in May, and we are in the process of meeting them. In Scotland and in Ireland, we've had successful meetings with ministers and officials and online events. Unfortunately, Northern Ireland and Wales have provided less opportunity for engagement in the last year or so, but we continue to monitor activity in those areas. As noted, I think the pandemic was an unexpected area and focus of our work over the last 2 years, particularly in the earlier phase of lockdown. Preparing guidance for members for each part of the UK, often against what could best be called evolving guidelines from government, was a key challenge and responsibility for the team, and one that required us to work with other trade associations as well as officials in government. This was a two-way process for the team, as we sought clarification on what the government was saying, but also expressed concerns over some of the guidance that was coming out, particularly on issues to do with things like retailers' responsibility for mask wearing by their customers, and when there were threats of legal action under disability legislation on the very same issue. Global pandemics aside, retail crime remains the most important campaign issue for us. When we started on campaigning on retail crime, ministers didn't even bother to attend meetings of the National Retail Crime Steering Group, sending their apologies at the last minute. Actually, to be fair, when the Metropolitan Police Commissioner turned up in full uniform, he was told he couldn't come in either. The computer said no. It is a testament, however, to the work that we have done in raising this issue with ministers, that ministers now not only attend, but actively lead the work of this group. Other groups, like the National Business Crime Centre, have seen an increase in their resourcing during this time, with Patrick Holdaway, who some of you will know, and who's now a superintendent, running it from the City of London Police. The call for evidence which we responded to was fed back by the government, and although their position wasn't as positive as we would like, at least local police forces were reminded of their duty to follow up on all crimes, whatever the value. As you would expect, of course, Scotland have led the way. I knew I'd get heckled at some point. They have passed legislation to give added protection to retailers. We supported this and campaigned for it, and we hope to emulate this south of the border very soon. While the NFN takes a leading role on this issue, we have worked with other trade associations, writing collectively to ministers and select committees, and taking part in industry-wide campaigns, such as the Home Office-funded Shop Kind campaign. A report by the House of Commons Home Affairs Select Committee not only supported our case, but provided much publicity and some momentum behind the issue. All of these things together may be behind the very slight shift that we have seen in the government's position, as they've conceded the possibility of considering thinking about changing their position. We will be continuing to keep our pressure on ministers on behalf of our members. As has already been noted, the carrier bag levy was a success for the Federation. We campaigned on this for many years, in fact before the levy even came into effect in England and Wales. And it took 18 months from the government committing to make the change to include our members to them actually doing it. But now, as Stuart said, we have a level playing field. For the political engagement team, deposit return schemes are a gift that just keeps giving. After the best part of 5 years' work in Scotland, we are waiting for the Scottish Government to announce a further delay to allow the scheme administrator, Circularity Scotland, time to get the scheme set up properly. In England and Wales and Northern Ireland, which are working collectively, the 2024 deadline for this seems to be in question as progress is moving at a glacial pace. Unlike in Ireland, where the Irish government are in a hurry to introduce DRS. We've been working with them and we're just waiting for them to publish the details of their plan. So didn't go ahead. There we go. Business rates is obviously a huge issue, with the promise last week for the abolition of business rates by one of the political parties, although perhaps not how they're going to fund it. The government's proposals on the response to the consultation held last year are due any time, so this issue is coming to the boil nicely. When we hear from the government what they're proposing, we will be telling our members and putting our plans together to campaign on your behalf. Calls for a £15 an hour minimum wage and the introduction of social care levy have pushed the issue of payroll costs further up our political agenda. We have continued to engage with the Low Pay Commission, reminding them of the burden placed on retailers by increasing wage rates and the national insurance and pension contribution increases that follow as a result. But with all the political parties committed to at least a £10 wage rate, we've had little success on this. So just to finish off the review element of this presentation, it is worth noting that we've not only met with police and crime commissioners, we continue to meet with civil servants and ministers in London and Edinburgh, and we've had particularly successful meetings with ministers in Scotland, and also a very successful online hustings with party representatives ahead of the Scottish parliamentary elections last May. Looking ahead, it's shaping up to be a busy 12 months for the political engagement team, with a lot of issues already coming over the horizon. We will continue our work with PCCs in our fight against retail crime and working with other stakeholders to push this issue forward as the industry speaks with one voice. We will continue to work with members of the House of Lords and their staff and through the APPG on retail crime to push for extra legal protection for retailers as the current crime bill progresses through the upper house. We know that amendments to that effect are going to be tabled, and we are working with them to try and get that successfully passed. When the Offensive Weapons Act comes into effect at some point, we will ensure that you all have the information you need to be compliant. As yet, we keep being promised that it will come in, we don't know when. In Scotland, when we get a launch date for DRS, we will step up our communications plans to ensure that all members know what they have to do, to have the information they need to make the decisions on how to collect the return cans or whether to seek an exemption. And we will work with the scheme administrator and other stakeholders to ensure that we have a scheme that works for all retailers. Similarly, in Ireland, with the announcement of the scheme there, we'll kick off our work to engage with members in that area, to give them the information they need. Excuse me. In the rest of the UK, DRS continues to be a waiting game, but we will continue to monitor. As payroll costs continue to rise over the next year, we will be looking at how we can approach this issue differently in our campaigning in order to emulate our successes that we've seen in other areas. We are formulating our ideas on this, and we'll be taking our proposals to the committee in due course. We don't know what the government's proposals are going to be on business rates. Nothing has yet been leaked. But we know that this has the potential to be the biggest and most complex of our work streams for the year. And we will start to communicate this once the government tells me what they're doing. Food labelling is something that hasn't really been on our agenda until this year, as we've faced a number of pieces of legislation. On the 1st of October, new labelling regulations came in, and we know that there's going to be more regulations next year. Sophie is already working with the comms teams, Sophie, over there, to pull together the information into a central single point on our website, thefedonline.com, so that members will be able to access the information they need more easily. Yesterday you heard information about the CRM. We are looking forward to that. Data and contacts are an important part of what we do in political engagement, tracking our contacts with people over time. So we are looking forward with enthusiasm to the new system and getting our data on that, and we're working with IT to ensure that we're ready for that development. So just to summarise, across our key issue of crime on DRS and payroll, costs and carrier bag levy, the political engagement team have been successful in raising the Federation's profile and promoting our issues across the whole of the UK and Ireland. This programme, plus anything that the governments of the UK decide to throw at us over the next 12 months, will continue over the coming year as we promote the independent retail sector and to make the Federation the trade association that everybody wants to go to. Thank you.
If you look at Adrian's slide, the first slide he put up, it was about his members of staff that he's got, because Adrian's always been really a member of one. But obviously we also have looking after Scotland, we have somebody who is dedicated to looking after Scotland and Ireland in particular, who's working extremely well with the Scottish Parliamentary Department. And I have to congratulate them because at the local luncheon at the Ritz, I sat next to the consultant, Gina, and she said to me, not only had the Scottish team with Jim Maitland and the rest of the team been really professional in the way that they handled it, they were in front of government ministers and they'd actually got another invitation to go back because of the work that they're doing. So well done to Scotland, and I just wish we did exactly the same. And the she's very nervous, but I also want to introduce you to Sophie Walker, who has actually joined the political engagement. She works out of the Bede House. Sophie, do you want to come to the rostrum and just introduce yourself?
Hello, conference.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself?
Oh, come on now. I'm Sophie. I work for political engagement up in Durham. And yeah, I'll hopefully be meeting you all very soon. Obviously, if there's any pressing issues that you want me to take over, just take my phone number. I'm available to have a call with you at any point.
There we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Question? Sorry, there's some questions. Sorry, Ray. Yeah.
Raymond L. Southwest. Adrian, should the opportunity exist with your discussions on business rates and with other MPs, can you just make the point, there's several of us that are in town centres or in busy office areas, and I've heard so many examples during this conference that have shocked me. We're trading well below our pre-pandemic figures, and I know there are some that might not get through it because we are slow recovering compared with a lot of the industry. So can you perhaps address with business rates whether there is an opportunity for support for town centres or high density office areas? So perhaps if the opportunity comes, you could address that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Next question.
Morning, conference. I just wanted to sort of mention the political hustings which took place in Scotland. And it was such a success in the sense that so many people outside of our organisation got to find out about the NFRN. And being a political issue at that time, a lot of the politicians saw our broadcast as well on social media. So well done to the team for pulling that one off.
Well, thank you. I think it was an extremely successful event that was pulled together in a relatively short time span by Shona. We had good support from the main political parties, which was fantastic. It did a lot for us in terms of our profile as a result, but it was a lot of work, but I think it was worthwhile.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
District Delegate, Colin Second, District Delegate for West Midlands. This year, obviously by coincidence, we've had our conference at the same time as the Conservatives have had theirs. Do we have anybody there?
No, I'm here.
Right.
I think there's more than Adrian attends the party conference. No, we've traditionally, and we have done in the past, gone to all of them, and then we cut it down, and we only went to 2 of them, and then we cut it down and only went to 1 of them. It always used to be the Conservative Party that we went to, and none other. Monty and myself went last year to all 3, and so did Solly attend, and Adrian and Mike came along to some of them. But to be truthful, I think we've got to look at that as a whole as to what the value of going to these conferences are. I think it's important that we have a voice in Westminster, but I do think there's a hell of a cost to it to do these events because they're not cheap to go in person. So the answer is some of them are online. Adrian is at this conference online because he's got access to it because of his he belongs to that party. You wouldn't have guessed, would you?
Well, I was just going to suggest, actually, what would have been a suggestion, maybe their chairman exchanging with our chairman. Would anybody have noticed? Because both of you got ruffled hair.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, so we do monitoring. Of course, Sophie and the team back is looking at it. They've already analysed what's gone off in the Labour Party conference and the Lib Dems as well. We keep a whole of, and the SNPs as well, everybody, every party. Okay, next question.
Don't forget Trump's hairstyle as well. Don't remember our picture. Right, two questions, please. Can you just expand on the Offensive Weapon Act of 2019? Is that to do with protecting the retailer or the retailer protecting themselves?
It's about protecting everybody. The Offensive Weapon Act has a number of provisions about firearms, about bleach, and other corrosive materials and restrictions on sales. But I think the sort of one of the key areas for us is the restrictions about parcels. Any parcel containing, for example, now a bladed item, which isn't necessarily just a knife, could be a screwdriver, is now an age-restricted product. It has to be labelled and can't be delivered to lockers, and you have to age check, or will have to age check when that, if you run a collection service, or even if you're delivering to a door. The Act, as you said, was passed in 2019, and we're waiting for those bits to come into effect.
So will the Amsters be on, like, UPS, for instance, rather than ourselves, though? Because obviously we can't open people's parcels.
No, that's why it would have to be labelled. What we don't know yet is quite how some of the parcel companies are going to deal with international parcels. Yeah. But there will have to be a sticker on there telling you that will have to be age checked before it's handed over.
And this is not so much a question as, you know, the wage increase, obviously that's going to affect everybody, but it's a catch-22 because obviously we'll have to increase our prices, so therefore the cost of living will go up, etc. So they'll only be back to stage one and then they'll have to increase again. And, you know, it's a vicious circle. Can you just point that out to them? You know?
Absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a vicious circle. I'm sure that the people who are far more eloquent about economics than I am will also point it out to them. But you're absolutely right as a principle. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Stuart, you just mentioned a few minutes ago that we should be re-evaluating whether we should be going to all the party conferences, whether they're value for money. But I don't know if anyone's read the Times this morning. 5.7% above inflation increase of pay rate to £9.42 an hour. That is what's coming to us. We need to be engaging with parties, whether it's the Tory party in government right now, whether the second biggest party would be Labour, so we need to be engaging with it. In Scotland, one of the things we do is we engage with all the three major parties and we go to their conferences. We need to be managing their expectations as opposed to them managing our expectations. This is why we're making headway in Scotland. We need to be doing this at a national level, because what happens at Westminster does impact Scotland. I always say we stay in our own lane in Scotland and do as much as we can, but there's a lot of things that are devolved to, not devolved, but reserved for Westminster, and we don't have, whenever we go to Scottish Government, they always say it's a reserved matter and it hampers us from actually making that change.
Yeah, I think what I'd say there is that, you know, England is in envy, quite frankly, in the way that you conduct yourselves in Scotland and what you've got out of Scotland and the way that you have a professional team. What we've got to do is look at how we engage with these MPs in Westminster, because sometimes going to party political conferences, all it is a picture game. It's just take a picture with somebody, try and give them a leaflet and walk away, and then take a picture thinking we've achieved something. Actually, two things happened recently in the last 2 years. Mike managed to actually get a special luncheon in the Houses of Commons which you couldn't buy, and meeting MPs that way. And also at the luncheon at the Ritz, we invited MPs, and we had an MP there that came along, and maybe that's the way to sit round a table with them, invite them for a lunch is better than actually having a reception that we've had previously, because as you know, and many national councils attended these functions, these MPs, all they do is they come in, they want a picture with somebody so they can put it on the platform as though they're doing work for us. And sometimes I don't think that's the best way of us spending our money to get that engagement. But I think, you know, we need to look at you guys, in all honesty, in Scotland, the way that you operate, the way that your team's put together, and maybe that's the way that we need to move forward. But I totally agree with you. The way that you handle it in Scotland is superb compared to what we do and our people there. But thank you for that.
Can I just say we did start a series of smaller dinners with small groups of MPs. I think they were quite effective. On the substantive issue, the problem we have when campaigning on the national minimum wage is that the Low Pay Commission is an independent body that has been told by government what it's going to find. And all of the political parties are committed in their manifestos to a £10 minimum wage. Therefore, trying to campaign against that is like hitting a head on a brick wall repeatedly. What, of course, now has changed is the 1.5% social levy that's coming on top of that, which is why, as I said in my presentation, we're going away and we're evaluating what we're doing on this and how we can approach it to try and get the sort of success we've had in other areas.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Conference. Adrian, obviously we've already mentioned the Daniel Johnson bill passed in Scotland. What are the obstacles that are in the way from us getting a similar bill passed here for our colleagues in the UK?
Members of Parliament. There was an amendment to do this put into the Police, Crime, Courts and Sentencing Bill that's currently going through Parliament. It was voted down. There was a small in committee, it was also voted down. There was a small concession by ministers that they might think about thinking about it. The bill is now in the Lords, and I'm talking to the Labour group in the Lords staff and their bill manager about the amendments that have been put up in the Lords and how we can support that. Now, there are amendments being put up by Lord Coker and also Baroness Neville Rolfe, who is in fact a Conservative peer. That's helpful because it's the government side. I'm in the process of starting to prepare a briefing which will go out to those members of the House of Lords and get them to circulate onwards. We can also put out through the Labour group as well in the Lords. So we are trying to get this done in the Lords. It'll then have to go back to the Commons and we'll start the battle all over again. But it's, you know, the problem at the moment is just the parliamentary process and that we don't have the government support.
Thank you. Next question.
Yet.
Paddy Permin, South East District. I'd like to congratulate all the work we've done in the past and now what you're doing, Adrian, but it throws me off when, I don't know, you must have read the article in the Mail from PCC of Hampshire, basically telling opposite of what we've been working with. Now, how can we work with PCCs who are not working with us, and yet they're telling us they're working with us, and they come up with telling us retailers have to pay for it?
Yeah, just before we left the office to come down here, we received an email from the PCC's office denying what had been reported. We did do a response to their consultation where we made our points, or Sophie made our points, that we didn't like what she'd said, that wasn't acceptable. They've now seemed to have retracted, or at least said that it wasn't what they said. But we will continue to engage with all at PCCs. They're in office, they have power, and if they're not on our side now, we need to work to get them onto our side.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Conference. Kishore Chandra, Nanda District. My question is about Ireland, because due to Brexit, it's a separate country. Has it made it life more difficult for you because of different laws and everything? Does it cost our federation lots of money? Thank you.
We've always had the issue that the Republic of Ireland is a different jurisdiction with a different body of law. That's always been the case. But what we have now, actually, we're in a better situation. As I said, we have Shona, who's a consultant. She works on Scotland, but she also works on the whole of the island of Ireland. And so we have a resource looking at those particular areas, which we've never had before. You know, there are things to do with vaping coming up in Ireland. There's DRS coming up in Ireland. So there's legislation we know coming our way, and Shona will be there working with us to support members through those processes. So it is always difficult, but we're in a better place than we've ever been before.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No more questions. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.